So let's start. Our last panel for today is dedicated to corporate success in CEE, trying to answer the question, human capital versus resource economy. As it goes with the tradition, we have 2 questions to answer. So our first question. Please get your devices ready for voting, and I will announce the first question. So the first question is, what would be the most popular source of financing for corporates in CEE in 2016-2017? And the answers are as follows. A, own capital. B, bank debt. C, public debt. D, public equities. E, private equities. So I will repeat. You can vote now. 30 seconds to cast your vote. So A, own capital. Basically reinvestment of profits. B, bank debt. C, public debt, meaning bonds. D, public equities, raising equity through IPOs. And E, private equities. So financing, attracting basically financial investors. So we have the results. So 45% of the audience, basically the majority of the audience, believes that the most popular or realistic source of financing for corporates in CEE will be own capital. Or 34% of the audience believes that it will be bank debt. Slightly less believes that it will be public debt or public equities. So now I invite the moderator of this panel. Oh, one more question, apologies, I keep forgetting about the second question. So the question about Ukraine, right? Yes, the question about Ukraine, question number 2. Do you believe the IT startups to become a driver of economic growth in Ukraine? And the answers are yes, A, they are already drivers. B, they will become in a few years. And C, no, they will not be drivers of the economic growth in Ukraine. So please make the vote. IT startups will be a driving force of economic growth, and 38% thinks that they will not become the driver of economic growth. So let's see if this opinion is going to change after the end of the panel. And now I invite the panel moderator, the founding president of CFA Ukraine Society, and the board member, Andriy Kunchuk. Please welcome.
Thank you, Anya. Thank you, everybody, for voting. Let me first invite our speakers, and then I will introduce our next steps. So I would like to invite to the stage Rufat Magdanov, who is head of IFC office in Ukraine and who has over 20 years of experience in IFIs in Central and Eastern Europe. Also, I would like to invite here Alex Lesica, who is CEO of Industrial Milk Company and President of Association of Ukrainian Agribusiness Club, and worked in agribusiness research for Central and Eastern Europe. Our next speaker is Bogdan Pupic, who is representing IT and technology sector. He is Vice President of KM Core and has over 30 years of technology and telecommunication experience, out of which 22 in Central and Eastern Europe. And last but not least, Akila Koksov, who is the Director of the Board of Governors. We have posted, sorry. And board member of UNGU, the formerly Standard UNGU, the investment house in Turkey, and board member of CFA Institute Board of Governors. And Konstantin Mohylievsky, who is partner at this Horizon Capital, and actually Kostya is a friend of mine who was helping me six years ago in organizing the first investment forum organized by CFA Society.
Mr. Moderator, may we begin with the job? It's late in the day.
Sure.
Do I need to press anything here? Okay. So, in a conference like this, towards the end of the day, one of the speakers comes to the podium. He is very well prepared. He prepared 4 days for his speech. He has a nice presentation. Comes to the podium to see there is only one guy left. Everybody else is gone, late in the day. And he respects the guy. He says, okay, I'll do my presentation nevertheless. So he makes his presentation that lasts 45 minutes. And at the end he says, well, thank you very much, sir, for listening to me patiently. The guy says, don't worry about it, I am the next speaker. Actually, I mean, it's the end of the day, it's the end of the day, but we have quite a number of listeners, so that's a relief, I think.
Thank you, Akila, for the job. And just to give what we are going to do for the next an hour and a half, we will focus on the investment in corporate sector, and we will not have the Q&A session in the traditional way, what we did before. So we will have Q&A online, and please raise hands, those of you who have devices to access website from the audience. Quite a few people, so if you don't have, please write a question on paper and give to those who have the access. So basically what you will need to do, you will need to get online using the Wi-Fi credentials on the slide and go to the website slido.com and enter their event number, which is 6471. And after that, you will be able to enter your question, and if applicable to a specific speaker, please indicate the speaker. I will be able to see your question on my computer here at the podium, and I will be able to route the question to the speakers. So to make it easy, I would like to start this introduction. First of all, I introduce myself, but I will ask speakers about different introductions. So about myself, as many of audience know, I was actively involved and is involved with CFA Society of Ukraine and volunteer also for CFA Institute. Professionally, I'm working on a few projects, but the main focus of mine at the moment is startup. It's a mobile application for carpooling or ride sharing for market in Northern America, mainly in the United States. So let me start with this introduction, so you know about the people business, and so you can understand what question would be appropriate for the speakers. So talking about Rufat, so please introduce IFC. Just I believe many people know, but just 1 minute, what you snapshot, what is the company and what is your role basically.
This one. Well, yes. Hello, everybody. I'm I'm a regional manager at IFC for Ukraine and Belarus. I've been based in Ukraine for over 4 years. Responsible basically for the operations in the countries. Our portfolio in Ukraine is slightly less than $1 billion, about 900 million these days. And in Belarus, it's about $250 million. Prior to this assignment, I was based in Moscow, where for 7 years, responsible for business development in a number of sectors. We call them manufacturing and services in the Central Eastern Europe region. So in that sense, this conference is exactly on the topic that I've been covering, especially when I was based my previous assignment. Before I was based in Washington, to a large degree, I also covered the Central Eastern Europe, mostly Southern Europe.
Sorry to interrupt, mostly about IFC, not your personal introduction, but I would like to say like about the business.
Well, yeah, I guess everyone knows what IFC is. IFC is working only in the private sector, predominantly the private sector, but we are the development bank. So on the one hand, we pursue obviously commercial interests. The investments that we make should be profitable. The loans that we provide should be paid back. The equities we invest in, we always hope that they multiply, so we're able to produce more equity investments. But our primary goal is development, so we don't invest only on the basis of profitability. We look at a number of other criteria, development, we call it, but these include employment, transfer of technology, and things like that. In Ukraine, our focus recently has been on the agricultural sector because we do take into account the competitive advantages of the countries where we operate. And also, by focusing on the agriculture, we alleviate the food problem around the world. So the food security is another goal that we're pursuing. We're able to pursue by what we do in Ukraine. In the past, we did more on the manufacturing sector. We hope to be able to do more in the manufacturing sectors going forward. We all know that this is not an easy subject. The banking sector is another, financial sector is another sector where we focus our activities around the countries where we work. Ukraine has been an exception to this rule, where the banking sector has been representing less than a third, which is normally the case for us. Partially this is because of this concentration, which we will be talking about, concentration and diversification, because we have been concentrating on the agribusiness. But agribusiness, when we talk about it, for us it's across the value chain. So now we're moving towards the infrastructure, which is necessary for the export of agriculture and generally infrastructure for the agriculture. But we hope to also get into the areas of energy, which is very important for Ukraine. Energy efficiency is the subject that we've been pursuing in Ukraine and in the region for some time.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, please, Akil, you're next, but please introduce UNLU and CFA Institute, but briefly you have 1 minute for that.
1 minute, okay. I am a director of UNLU & Company, which is the largest independent investment house in Turkey. And we are about 300 people now. And our activities cover pretty much the whole investment banking spectrum, from brokerage, asset management, and non-performing loan management, research, etc. We also have our own private equity fund, which is focusing on investments into Turkey. And also I am a board member of this insurance company in Turkey also.
About CFA Institute?
Yes, of course. I'm a director, I'm a board governor of CFA Institute for the last 4 years. And today in the morning I talked about what CFA Institute does. Maybe throughout this conversation we'll
okay, thank you. Thank you. Roman, Bogdan, sorry, please introduce Kempor, what you are focusing on business.
Thank you very much. I'm Bogdan Kupic. I'm Canadian expatriate who's been working in Ukraine since 1992. I came here to work for a multinational company, and I've stayed here ever since. Basically involved in technology and technology investment. And KM Core is, I'm a vice president at KM Core. It's a technology investment company, but some of you may remember a company called Micro, which, by the way, this month will be celebrating 25 years of existence. It started out as a company that was doing microelectronics and branched out into many, many different things, into systems integration and IT services, and from becoming an international company, going through an IPO in London in 2007. It's a long history, but basically we have a fund that's invested over $100 million. One of our projects that we're very proud of, and by the way, thank you IFC, because they're a shareholder, as is Intel Capital in De Novo. It's the biggest data center and cloud computing company in Ukraine. And I think it's one of the success stories, basically, we can talk about. About a year and a half ago, because of the urgent need in, well, the conflict war, whatever you want to call it, volunteers came to us and said, we have a problem, we can't compete, we don't know exactly information-wise what's happening in the zone, so we helped develop some defense and security things. One is a tablet computer that's being used in the Atoll zone. And there's more than 5,000 tablet computers currently being used by the Ukrainian military, and it's saving lives. So we got into the defense and security area, not because we really wanted to, but because there's an urgent need. And basically, urgent need creates need for innovation. And we've been able to do about 18 projects, from mine detection to anti-sniper, all different kinds of technologies, which is a testament to the human capital, the intellectual capital that exists in Ukraine.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will touch on this later, definitely. So Alex, please introduce, you also have very two hats. Please introduce your business, IMC, and the membership organization you are part of.
Thank you very much. My name is Alex Lisitz. I'm the CEO of Industrial Milk Company. Industrial Milk Company is one of the largest agriculture producers in Ukraine. So they do operate right now more than 136,000 hectares of land in 3 regions. We do have also more than 6,000 cows. We do produce cash crops and potatoes, milk of course as well. And we do have also right now more than 600,000 tons of storage facilities. Company is public, listed at Warsaw Stock Exchange since 2011. And since 2013, we are also a client of IFC. So IFC has granted us a loan for 7 years with $30 million. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you please introduce Horizon Capital, what the company does, and what is the focus?
My name is Konstantin Mogilevsky. I'm a partner at Horizon Capital. We are basically one of the largest and oldest private houses here in Ukraine. We started as Western IS more than or around 20 years ago. First managing US government money, then raising 2 private funds, EGF 1 and EGF 2. So in total we had more than $600 million assets under management. We actively invest, and in Ukraine, most of you probably, if not all of you, know here one of our recent investments, Rosetka, #1, Ukrainian e-commerce player. We invest basically across all sectors. It's financial sector, both banks, insurance companies, telecoms, pharmaceuticals, IT, juices, you name it. We invest not only in Ukraine, but also in Moldova, very active in Moldova, also in Belarus, in Russia, where we successfully invested and exited from Tinkoff Bank. That's basically it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And so the next slide, again, few like organizational questions or organizational messages from myself. So again, I remind you that to raise questions, you use details indicated on the slide, and we have a few questions, and thank you for that. So you know who are speakers. So and our panel we will try to do it devoted to 4 major topics. First of all, we will discuss financial options for corporates in Ukraine. Then we will focus on the environment of doing business. So again, as CEE and Ukrainian focus. And thirdly, we will speak about ethical issues on the corporate level and principles CFA stands for, which is ethics, and how it applies, and touch on that. Then we will devote topic to IT specifically, and basically this is what we planned. So let me start with the financial option, and I would like to start with Attila and ask him about more regional perspective and his Turkish experience, what financial options exist on the Turkish market, so we can then dive into the Ukrainian one after that.
Okay. Well, the Turkish market, just to give you some background, I mean, until 10 years ago, for 20 years, we had very high inflation rates in Turkey. Like, Turkey is a very unique country in that sense. For 20 to 25 years, we had this so-called strato-inflation. We never had macro hyperinflation, but we had this strato-inflation, which is somewhere anything between like 25% to 100%. And that lasted 25 years in Turkey. So our generation, like all managers in Turkey now, all CEOs, all bank managers, we were born into inflation. We were raised in inflation. And we've never seen anything else until maybe 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago. Then inflation fell, but it fell to, again, 10% level. So that's the environment we've been raised in. And that's why the Turkish investors are all very short-term oriented. Our long-term is 1 month. Like bank deposits average about, I think, 3 months, even less actually. And that's the horizon of the Turkish investors, because they still are under the influence of these inflationary times.
So even now, 3 months?
Even now,
okay.
even now. So for 10 years, we had really stable inflation, 10% or less, but people still remember those days. And they still invest into hard currencies, like US dollar or gold. Roughly more than half of Turkish household wallet is invested in gold and foreign exchange. And it's a bad portfolio. It doesn't align with the interests of the country. I think similar problem is here in Ukraine. Whenever you have these uncertainties, people tend to invest into these, it's called hard assets, but they don't align with the interests of the country. So in such an environment, companies tend to borrow or get financing, mostly from banks. But again, they are also of short-term nature, because banking liabilities are short-term, mostly deposits. Of course, occasionally they borrow long-term from international capital markets, like 2-year or 3-year, they get 2 or 3-year financing through bonds, long-term bonds, relatively long-term bonds. But all deposits are short-term. So they can only lend short-term to Turkish corporations. So that's, it's quite limited. But in the last few years, our corporate bond market started reviving. So we see there's some demand by Turkish individuals, we have a small Turkish institutional investor base. So there's some demand there, and also there's some foreign demand into Turkish corporate debt. But then again, that's also quite limited. And the tenors are somewhere between 1 year to 3 years.
And can a Turkish company do IPO on
Yes.
Istanbul Stock Exchange?
Of course.
And how much is it possible to raise?
Sure. It depends. In Istanbul Stock Exchange, we have 300 plus public companies, trading companies. Some are quite large. The market caps are like, there are companies, banks, especially in the tune of $20, $30 million with 25% free float. So actually, it is easier to make a large IPO than a small IPO. Because when you make a large IPO, let's say 500 million to $1 billion and even higher, you go to foreign institutional investors. And most of the foreign institutional investors have an interest in Turkey, considering our long-term perspective and Turkish demographics and what have you. So they can buy in chunks of $50 million plus. That is, of course, provided that the company is solid and so on. But if you come up with a small IPO, like small to medium-sized IPO of, let's say, $10 million to $100 million, it's almost impossible because there is nobody to sell it to. You can sell it in the local market, there is much demand. There aren't any local institutional investors to buy. So for large IPOs, yes. For small IPOs, no.
Okay, thank you. So next I would like to ask Alex about his company options. Like you being CEO, you kind of live this life with how to finance your growth. And so what options specifically your company have nowadays in Ukraine to get financing?
I mean, right now we do work actually for the banks, so we are paying tax, and we are not thinking about the growth because, I mean, we are thinking of course, but right now the access to the financial resources in the country here are very limited. Also abroad, I mean, so long we have a war with Russia and Ukraine, we should forget about getting access to the cheap money. So, my opinion, agriculture is quite profitable in Ukraine, so that means if we wanted to finance our growth, we actually think about own capital and not about debts. That's the idea. Right now, I know actually only two institutions here in the country which do finance agriculture with more or less predictable rates is IFC and EBRD. All the rest Ukrainian banks, their money is not available, or actually very expensive money. So.
Okay, thank you. Actually, there is a joke that banks give you money when you actually don't need them. They don't give you money when you need them. Okay, so thank you, and let's ask IFC what in your 1 billion portfolio you have a lot of companies, and what do your portfolio company have options to use for financing?
Our portfolio companies have an option of coming back to us and asking for help. So that's obviously a positive thing about IFC, but as much as I love IFC and respect our colleagues from EBRD, I think this is not a good situation for Ukraine, when these are pretty much only two institutions that are able to provide long-term or any meaningful financing. But even in this environment, it's not easy for us to find clients because we don't want to be dispersing into a hole. Because if the companies are not able to raise working capital, if not able to roll over debt they have, we will be basically the only providers of financing, and that's not sustainable, and we're not supposed to lose our money. So that actually makes it quite difficult for us, as much as the role we have today to play in the market to support the private sector. This is a challenge we are dealing with. Also in the banking sector, through which we're able to reach smaller companies, SMEs, and even not SMEs, even like mid-sized companies but they are at the threshold where we're not comfortable providing direct financing because of the structure we have, of the requirements we have. It doesn't make sense for a company to raise 5 million from IFC, unless it's some special case, some special equity interesting case, then we can maybe make an exception. Otherwise, it doesn't make much sense. So we go through banks, but the problem is the banks are not lending actively. Some of them are liquid even, but not prepared to take risks. So we designing other products like risk-sharing facilities. We have a number of them. We've done them in the past, but we see more demand for such products today. We've rolled a risk-sharing facility, rolled it over, basically improved the new facility with Raiffeisen Alliance biochemicals to be able to reach the farmers, the crop protection products. We're developing some others. They are in work, so we'll be announcing about such products soon. address the country's needs. So on the one hand, we're looking at sectors which make sense to invest in. Obviously, agricultural sector is one of them. But on the other, we see an enormous need in the energy sector, a sector that we have not been touching due to a number of reasons. First, it's a state-dominated sector. We don't necessarily work with the government, state-owned companies. But we are finding schemes to help the energy sector. Again, this is something that works, and too early to report about results, but hopefully we will be having some results there too. And maybe in the future, in the nearest future, we can support some of the projects with private operators that want to enhance the recovery from existing gas fields, so develop new gas fields. Again, this is something we could potentially do. We're trying to push the envelope that one too.
Thank you. So there are common complaint about institutions like IFC that they compete with the private lenders and basically like ruin the business because of some disbalance of cost of capital. So in your case, you said there are, do you feel the competition at the moment, or like the reason you cannot find the client is because the business is bad, or because there is other options for that?
Well, in my experience, the closest I came to competition was in Russia before the 2008 crisis. This is where banks were very active, and then we were sometimes approaching the same clients, but we would always differentiate, and we will not compete. We ourselves are censoring this because our board would not allow us to go and directly compete with Sberbank or Citibank or the others. In Ukraine, that has not been the case. I don't think, and it's certainly not the case today. It's far from that.
Okay, thank you. So question about your portfolio companies. So how the situation looks, and not only financing option at the moment, but also do you see any exit strategy, and what exit strategies, options do you have for your funds?
So talking about financing, our companies and we as investment teams, we focused quite often on converting our debt from dollars or euro to local currency, hryvnia. So that took us some time, and our companies in most cases, we were lucky or smart enough, depending how you name it, to convert to hryvnia before this big devaluation which took place at the beginning of this year. So most of our companies didn't suffer much in terms of debt. In this case, in case of financing, I mean, our companies are growing, and we prefer, of course, to finance at least short-term growth from working capital, from the operational cash flows. I mean, we do in talks with IFIs like AFC or EBRD in some cases. For example, Biopharma was and still is considering building another plant. The first one, it built with Horizon and our partner FMO money, and we also got some export financing from Italian banks, primarily UniCredit. Now these banks are still open for the talks because it was Italian equipment. Of course, IFIs are very interested to finance such projects. In terms of short-term debt, I mean, in dollars it's not difficult, or euro to get short-term debt below 10% interest rate. Now in Ukraine, if the company is in a good shape. In terms of exit opportunities, I mean, of course I can't disclose what we are working on now, but I mean, we see the interest from strategics. What I can tell you from open information, but from what we know already, right? For example, there was not much attention, but in my opinion, it was worth it that a group of private equity funds, European private equity funds, such as Nordic Capital, via the SPV in Switzerland, they bought Pharmastat, which is a top 10 Ukrainian pharmaceutical producer, for a very significant number. I mean, it wasn't disclosed, and from what I know, and I tend to believe this number, it's very high.
And what was your latest exit from the investment?
We did Tinkoff last year in Russia, in Ukraine, like we did MTV exit in Belarus also recently, also successfully with we made some money on it. not as much as on Tip-Off, of course. So in Ukraine, what I recall is platinum belt, but it was right before Orange Revolution. So
was it everything strategic investors, right? So you are not considering an IPO at the moment?
No, Tip-Off did an IPO. Let me put you this way. I mean, of course, the financial investors are more interested in Ukrainian market now, clearly for the obvious reason, because they're hoping to take more debt. But if you look at the M&As which took place in Ukraine this year, first of all, this pharmaceutical deal is kind of strategic, because these are funds which are focused on pharma, and it was a add-on acquisition for the Switzerland pharmaceutical company. So in a way, it was a strategic acquisition. Second, there were two M&As in the IT sector, at least in Ukraine, which were disclosed. From what I know, there were much more M&As, quite significant ones, which were not disclosed in this sector. And there were two acquisitions, one in Odessa, right, this by Snapchat, which is believed to be $150 million or something. Another was by Oracle in Dnipropetrovsk, which did not get much publicity, but believed to be even larger, and also in cash. So I mean, it was in both cases it was strategics who made this acquisition. So we see there is an interest from strategics in Ukraine now. Of course, maybe not as high as it used to be, but the valuations which we are talking about in Odessa is fantastic, right? The company, in my understanding, has several $1 million in revenue or even less, right? And was acquired for 150 something. Pharmastar, in my understanding, was quite a high multiple even for Eastern European markets in the country, not just for Ukraine. So it's not that bad.
Okay, thank you. So Bogdan, question goes to you briefly about what your portfolio company has on the radar of financing.
I think we'd love to have the problems Turkey has, because access to capital, which should be typically in the technology space, is venture capital, and it really is non-existent to a large extent in Ukraine, including Ukrainian venture capital companies and international VCs. So typically you can't go to a bank to fund a startup or an early stage, so you use your own resources as much as you can. Unfortunately, that's the situation. An operating company such as De Novo, where this was probably 5.5 or 6 years ago, where we worked with Intel Capital and IFC for quite a long time. And the company De Novo is a totally transparent company. It's a totally commercial company. In fact, the policy was to do business with commercial companies. So most of the biggest international banks are currently clients of De Novo. So there was quite a long due diligence process with IFC and Intel Capital. You can imagine two companies, but it was successful, and I think it's working extremely well. And in the technology space, as I say, there's a lot of potential. The potential, unfortunately, is not being realized. A couple of cases that have been stated where companies have been sold, but it's corporate venturing. In other words, large corporates come in and buy innovation and basically take it somewhere else, and that's a bit of a problem. It would be good to have more the innovation staying here. And we'll get into the IT topic a little later, so I think we can talk about that.
Okay, thank you, Bogdan. I have quite a few questions from audience, and thank you very much for using the online tool. It's really very helpful. And I just can extend to Rufat's few questions about Maria and basically, briefly speaking, lessons learned and how this case influenced IFC investment into agribusiness in Ukraine. Does it have any negative impact?
Mike doesn't want to talk. Okay. Well, it's maybe too early to have all the lessons learned. We'll have probably more lessons along the way. With Maria, it was probably a combination of a number of things. The more difficult market for the company to raise funding, basically
story, probably more than they should. So the company now has new management. The new management is trying to basically save the case, and so we have the colleagues working on that. But the general lesson learned from any case where the investment is not successful are normally quite similar. So you have to be in the right market, deal with the right people, have experienced management, who are very cost effective and focused on costs. And that's very important. I think that was also very important in this case. Focusing on costs is extremely important.
Thank you. And this is like good transition to our issue that we want to discuss about the ethical way of doing business. And basically, as you know, CFA Institute stands on 3 principles and 3 values. First, this so-called 3E. First is education, high level of education, and CFA charter requires you to go through 3 levels of exam, which are intense. Statistically, only 20 people who start the program end it up, and so this is very rigorous education. And second E is ethics, which is every CFA Institute and CFA Society member needs to adhere to professional standards of conduct, which includes ethical way of doing business and putting client interest first and managing conflict of interest. And third E is excellence. Basically, this is the result of your education on one hand, and ethical behavior. This gives you excellence in your professional conduct. So I want to touch this topic, and let's again we start with Attila and like CFA view on the issue of CFA Institute impact on the region, and moreover your personal, like you are also wearing a few hats, being on the board of companies, different organizations. So what is CFA Institute stands, and what's the result in the region that we see, and what is your personal way to managing existing conflict of interest?
Well, in its initial years, the CFA Institute started out as a credentialing institution, and eventually morphed into this, like the 3 E's you're mentioning. And since 2008, we even raised our voice on ethical issues. If you remember my presentation this morning, together with the Edelman Group, we are doing this survey every year, and we measure the trust consumers feel towards certain industries. And for 4 years in a row now, the banking sector and financial services come at the very low end. And when we ask people, why don't you trust these sectors, they say bankers and investment managers are greedy, and they occasionally use the term crooks. And so there is this almost hatred against our industries, against the financial industry. And this is a global phenomenon. We have the same problem in Turkey. I don't know if you have this problem here. I'm sure at least they are not respected too much. So that's why since 2008, we as CFA Institute decided to use a bolder voice as the Institute on ethical issues and say things that the industry is doing wrongly and publicly. We say it publicly. So sometimes our members don't like it, but we have to admit to our mistakes, to the wrong things we've done in the past. We have to admit to them, and we have to say them publicly and warn our constituents, like all investment professionals, bankers, not to repeat them again. We have to do this over and over again because it's a long-term process. You can't just make people ethically overnight. But of course, through our regulators in several jurisdictions, through self-regulatory associations, we also have to make sure systems exist to get the people who violate ethical rules out of the system. That's
in your personal experience, like, do you yourself have these challenges challenges to, to make decisions among two interesting parties, and what is your decision-making process? Regarding your personal experience, regarding yourself being part of, for example,
in our firm,
like in your firm and being on the board of organizations.
Well, if you manage an investment house, and if you manage a full-fledged investment house, you know, every day you come up with conflict of interest issues. Because I mean, we are in the brokerage business, we do research, we are in the asset management business, we are in private equity business, we are in debt collection business, and you face these problems every day. But the rules are there, universal rules are there. So if you abide those rules, then things should be okay. But of course, not everybody does. So this is something that we manage.
So we unfortunately do not have the Minister of Agriculture, and as far as I know, he has some investment in some investment fund, and also doing the public work. So I would ask him how he managed this. So then, if he's not here, I need to ask Alex. Alex also wearing two hats, being CEO and organization and president of association which his organization is part of. How do you balance your, like if you need to do lobbying on behalf of your association, how your current employee influence your decision making, how you make your decisions?
Ukrainian Agribusiness Club is actually the #1 in Ukrainian agriculture in terms of lobbying, but at the same time, the all decisions made by Ukrainian Agribusiness Club are made by so-called presidia of board. So we have there 8 companies, and usually I do not make any kind of decision without permission of the board. And board meets usually once per month. That means we just to discuss that, and we do see actually should we lobby that point, or should we say no, we do not touch that. So that's actually more or less democratic way to solve the problem. In terms of my company in ATIC, for example, I mean, around the world, there are a lot of ethical problems with agriculture, and the same problem is also in Ukraine. What we discuss in the country here right now, there are a lot of topics which probably not really relevant to many countries like in Europe, but in Ukraine is, yeah. So, for example, one of the topics, an ethical, social topic, is land market introduction, yes or not. There are huge discussion here in the society and in policy, should Ukraine introduce the land market or should not? The same story is also with GMO. GMO should be or should be not. The farms, should we actually go more in the direction of the small farms like in Europe? But is the question, should we get money for subsidies? Or should we have large farms like my company? Then is an ethical question, large is good for the society, for the rural area or not? So there are a lot of questions what we do touch right now in a policy in a society, and I didn't see actually a big difference between the ideas of the Ukrainian Agribusiness Club and my company, because we have practically the whole large companies there, so it's not a big problem.
Thank you. So also it's more not ethical but more social corporate responsibility. So in Ukraine, a lot of agribusiness firms, they are exhaustively using land to produce sunflower oil. And after a few years, the land is basically not possible to use for anything. So, what is your personal opinion, and maybe not opinion, not of your employer, it's commercial interest, but position of the Ukrainian Agribusiness Club on the issue?
I mean, the idea, actually the problem is of many people here, they do watch TV, and what the TV says, they believe it's right. On TV, we see sometimes the reportage that sunflower is bad, or rapeseed is bad, or export is bad, and everything is bad, and agriculture is bad, and animal wealth is bad. So I've never seen on TV one top news about some good news about agriculture. Never ever. It doesn't matter where are you. In Australia, in Germany, somewhere else, never. And that's a big problem, because the people think agriculture is always bad. That's not true. This big mistake is that sunflowers, for example, do some damages on the land. That's not right. It has been like 40 years ago, but right now we do use special technologies in agriculture, so-called smart agriculture. We do use no tillage. we do use zero tillage, we do use strip tillage, etc. So that right now, there are a lot of soil solving technologies which do help to prevent actually the whole damages. I do not see a big problem that actually right now in Ukrainian agriculture, everyone, big company or small company, doesn't matter which one, knows that the sunflowers, for example, or rapeseed, for example, should be in the same field once at least at 4 years. No one is trying to do that more.
Okay, thank you, Alex. So, but in terms of, also I spoke yesterday to the person who was saying, okay, this IFI money is easy to get, and usually what owners do, they just pocket it and basically steal it from the company and misuse it. So what is your view on this issue, and do you have process in place to make not it happen?
Yeah, if that was true, then we would not exist anymore, because we do not. IFC for years has not increased its capital. So we have the capital that was initially contributed by our shareholders, the countries, and we've been operating sustainably and sustaining even crisis happen. At the same time, in multiple locations. So if we have crisis happening like in 5, 6 regions, maybe a big problem, but we've been able to withstand crisis in 2 or even 3 regions. But having said this, of course, sometimes we do have cases where investments don't work out, and big part of it is due to the management being wrong, or the shareholders having perceived intentions, so that happened. So to prevent this, we obviously have a very rigorous due diligence process and try to be very selective. And you said it's not. It's easy to get. I don't think it's easy. It's actually quite difficult to get funding from IFIs, including ourselves, because we do have this rigorous integrity due diligence, looking at the integrity of the shareholders. And this is the reason why we have not been able to work with a number of groups in Ukraine, or a number of groups in Russia or other places, because we do look at the links of the shareholders with the government, whether they unduly use the relationships they have, or if they themselves are in politics and they unduly use that relationship. So these are things we look at, how they made their first money. Obviously, we need to be mindful that in this region, there had to be a way to earn our first capital. Mostly that what we accept is that the capital earned through trading. That was mostly the source of initial capital, but it's not a black and white area, but we try to use the best judgment and choose the right partners. Having chosen the partners, we also work with most of them. We analyze the corporate governance structure and practices they have, and offer them formal or informal help to improve corporate governance. It could be formal engagement, actually, to make recommendations, do things like succession planning and divide roles, and then between the shareholders and the executives. And a number of techniques that are well known, and we've been actually quite active in this area in Ukraine specifically, and in Russia also, in the region. Then with the emphasize that, focused on some other areas to help the companies, but now we're coming back to the corporate governance. I think we'll be doing more of it, especially dealing now with also with state-owned enterprise, potentially looking at privatization cases and PPPs, and it will be quite important to focus on that.
Okay, thank you. Bogdan, in your case, I will not ask about your personal challenges with managing conflict of interest, but I will ask you about actually one of the questions from our audience. In terms of in Ukraine, there is corruption, and government corruption is one of the biggest problems. And do you, as a group of companies, as an investor, doing anything to improve this from your involvement?
Well, I'll talk about De Novo again, which is the data center company, right? It's totally transparent, audited. The board of directors is comprised of the former head of the EBRD in Ukraine and the former head of IBM in 2 of us. So everything there, in fact, proof in the pudding is that the tax inspectors come, of course, on a regular basis, but they don't find anything. And they go away sometimes frustrated. But it's an example where you start a new kind of company, you start a new kind of business, you're totally transparent. It's hard to compete sometimes because the other people doing something similar are using other methods, if you know what I mean. And consequently, you have to sort of break through. But as I said earlier, some of the biggest international banks are customers, you know, Raiffeisen, Unicredit, etc. are clients, and they're very happy with the fact that it's a commercial basis, it's run on service level agreements, and in 6 years of operation, not 1 second has it been down. So for customers, it's extremely good.
Okay, thank you. Kostya, your question, actually, you don't have to answer. We had in our morning session keynote speech from Natalia Yaresko, who is currently finance minister for Ukraine, but Natalia is actually a friend of society, CFA Ukraine, and we cooperated for many years. But I have to ask you this question, as I asked everybody. So Natalia used to be, or I don't know the current state, the actually founder of Horizon Capital. So there is potential conflict of interest of the person being, having corporate interest in your business and being finance minister at the moment. So how your company, partner, you are of managing this situation in terms of conflict of interest?
I don't think I'm the person to ask this question. It's better to ask our legal counsel or Natalie herself. I'm sure you had a chance today. So there is no conflict of interest. I mean, she went through all the procedures, the fund went through all the procedures. Among our investors, we have IFC as well, so we take such obligations, rules very seriously. And so when she is a minister for a year almost now, they don't notice a single scandal, right? And there will be no, I'm sure, related to things like this. So everything will be fine.
Okay, thank you. Good to hear. Hopefully, yeah, probably, might take away. It depends on person, on personal integrity. What Rupat was saying, that, you go through the track record of the person, and usually, if the person has, was involved in something that you would consider not correct, and you would pay attention to that. So yeah, I probably would skip a few of our themes, and I just think that IT topic is quite important, and we had one of our voting question about IT startups. So let's move to this theme, and I would like to start with Bogdan, as you are representative of the IT sector. So basically, what is your view on the IT sector in Ukraine? What opportunities are and what challenges? And specifically, which questions we have from the audience is like brain drain, people leaving the country and moving, what government should do to stop, and what government should or shouldn't do overall to improve the IT sector in Ukraine.
The first thing you should understand that IT sector is very broad. So you have IT outsourcing, which is using tax optimization programs in order to be able to sell their services. It's employing thousands of young people, giving them a good salary. Unfortunately, it's good, and it's a good start, and it's a good base, but in many cases it exports the innovation somewhere else, and it doesn't stay here. So that's one part of IT is outsourcing, and oftentimes I'm sure that politicians confuse this outsourcing with what IT market, for example, which is traditional, buying computer systems, ERP systems, CRM, big systems that government needs, private sector needs, is down by at least 50% over the last couple of years. So in that sense, the IT industry is not doing very well. The other topic is startups, right? Everybody in the world. In fact, you can go to Africa, you can go to any country in the world, they talk about entrepreneurship, innovation, startups, and so on and so forth. So it's a great topic. And Ukraine, of course, has this legacy of research and development and science and software engineering, etc., which is a phenomenal resource. Unfortunately, it's not always being, utilized properly. And your question is, what can the government do? Well, there's a whole bunch of things the government can do. In some cases, they should just stay away, and in some cases, they can do a lot of things. And I think the best advice that I would give, sort of, to the Ministry of Economy, Ministry of Education, etc., is that you can learn from countries that have transformed their economy. And I say IT is technology in general. So it's nanotech, it's biotech, it's health, it's a lot of different things. Learn from Israel, learn from Ireland, learn from Canada, US, Silicon Valley, India, China. How is it that they are able to get people that left the country to come back and be more successful in their own country? And I think that's the challenge for the government today. There's a brain drain, as you say. People, even when I was with Digital Equipment Corporation, there's at least 14 of my people immigrated to Canada. Well, they haven't come back. And it's like dozens and hundreds of examples. So you need to create the conditions for them to come back and be able to be more successful here. I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not saying it can be done quickly, but there's a model. I have a copy, but it's a Berlin, Germany-based model which has all the different components, all the pieces of the puzzle you need in order to support your startup ecosystem. And this ecosystem is comprised of policy and customers and education and all of these different things. And my advice would be for the government, sit down, do some brainstorming on all of these pieces of the puzzle and see what you can do. You can do today, you can do in 2 years, you can do in 5 years, and to kind of give people that are thinking about leaving the opportunity to do something here themselves. And of course, financing, angel investment, venture capital, these are all parts of this puzzle, which is very weak. The links in the chain in Ukraine are very weak. Just yesterday, I saw a statistic that Silicon Valley, 47% in 2014 of the exit value in venture capital remained in Silicon Valley. 47% of global value. So there's something there. And in fact, why do people go there to realize themselves? Probably at least a third of the startups in Silicon Valley are immigrants. So you can learn a lot from what they do. I'm not saying you can recreate Silicon Valley, that's a myth. But you can learn from Israel, you can learn from Ireland, you can learn from Silicon Valley. I'm sure Turkey, Berlin, there's lots of examples. And sort of see what fits the Ukrainian model. What is the skill set Ukraine has, and then develop a strategy. I think that's the start.
Okay, thank you. Question you mentioned about the few deals in Odessa, chat company and United Coast marketing company that we acquired, and you have investment in Cyclone. So what is your view on the IT in the Ukraine and the region? So what potential it has, and what should be done basically to develop and preserve it?
Well, it's hard to say anything new on this topic. I'm sure everybody is optimistic about IT in Ukraine. I myself started my career actually more in IT than in finance, and I'm half IT by my education, economical cybernetics, so I'm very optimistic about IT. In our portfolio, in addition to Cyclone, we have Rosetka as well, yes. Right? In our portfolio, it's one of the best performing companies, obviously, right? Because especially if it's a outsourcing company or it's product company, its markets are broad, it's dollar or euro denominated, so the revenues did not suffer from the valuation. The revenues are growing and so on. So of course it's very, very promising market. In terms of the outlook, again, hard to add anything. Like we are optimistic, and there are reasons for that. I mean, a couple of years around that, everybody was like very impressed by Google acquisition of Udemy for $40 million, right? Now we had at least 2 deals this year, right? And actually, we can add also Horizon Investment and Разведка as well, right? In addition to this, Odessa and Dnipropetrovsk, $100+ million deals. I mean, Odessa and Dnipropetrovsk plus Horizon Investment. So that's a very good growth. Again, to the best of my knowledge, there were more deals on the market. It's just that they were not disclosed, and they are of very significant size. And I'm sure there will be more deals to come. So outsourcing will be growing. I hope that IT industry and the government will find a solution to all these tax discussions which they have now. I mean, product companies are growing again, show very good results. We have more, I mean, these 2 deals which took place in Odessa and Dnipropetrovsk, it's both product companies, right? It's very good sign as well. And it's very technological companies, it's not something basic, you know. So, again, it's hard to say it's an Intel very smart or something very new. We all see that there is a ground there. The number of IT companies in Ukraine is growing, the number of people who want education. I have some observations, for example, about some IT educational companies which my friends own. And I mean, they recently launched Go IT company, for example, IT educational companies recently launched a course for the kids, Go ITians, and they've hired like 120 kids like this, and these kids, like their parents are from Cabinet of Ministers, it's CEO of big companies. I don't know, half of the clients are kids, girls, I'm sorry, half of the kids are girls. So it's very cool now, right? When I was started studying economical cybernetics, it was for nerds, you know? And now it's IT is cool, and it's a very good trend. And with such M&As which we have now, when people become rich, successful, and you know, it's a very good example for the young people that where they can become successful. You know, stop all this crying about like there are not enough reforms, there are not enough this, there is not enough that. I mean, people can be successful in Ukraine, make money, they have very good careers, and be successful globally, even based in Ukraine.
Thank you. Alex, a question to you regarding the innovation in agribusiness. What your company utilizes at the moment, and what projects are you considering to innovate agribusiness?
I just wanted to add a few things what Bogdan said. I completely agree with him. The government can do a lot of stuff just to attract the people to come back from foreign countries. And I think the very important thing is they need to fight the corruption here. As an entrepreneur, if I'm I used to live in Germany for many years and used to work there, and I've never, during 12 years, seen anyone visitor from tax office. Here in Ukraine, we do every second week see the visitor from the tax office. And that's a big issue, because as an entrepreneur from the IT sector, I did need to concentrate on my business and not answering the stupid questions from the tax office. That's a very easy answer. So fighting corruption is the key issue to attract people to come back and to attract actually investments into the Ukrainian business, doesn't matter which one. About agriculture, as I said before, you know, agriculture is developing quite well in Ukraine, and right now we are discussing about stuff like smart agriculture, so new technologies, and here is a lack of IT solutions, and it's a big problem, because agriculture is very complex. We have been discussed also many times with IFC, for example, and companies, international companies, because in agriculture we need not only to use the bookkeeping system like 1S, something like that, we need to control the using of the fuel, we need to control the using of the seed. Everyone combine and everyone seeder has implemented kind of new modern technologies, and everyone new combine has also kind of iPad there. So that means that's a huge, huge challenge for the whole sector. First of all, to get involved technicians in that sector, IT solutions, but the very big problem is to educate people. Because you can imagine if you buy a new combine for $400,000 plus equipment for additional $50,000 plus trackers, etc., with all the controls. So, and then try to find somebody in a rural area in Ukraine who is going to drive that and to give you kind of report every day. So that's a big issue for the next years. So I would say innovation in Ukraine agriculture means IT solutions, equipment, and education.
Okay, thank you. Just a follow-up question. So in terms of question also to Bogdan, consider in terms of bottleneck of development of business in Ukraine, what would you say the largest issue to prevent business from development? Like, is it corruption, or that you mentioned, or is it something
Well, I think there's no issue with intellectual capability of Ukrainians. Not only that, they're also quite entrepreneurial if you give them the opportunity. Yesterday I met with the CTO of one of the largest retail companies in Canada. He was visiting here. He uses 600 engineers from Ukraine in outsourcing, and they basically do all of the IT systems for the team in Canada. He said it's the most successful thing that he's ever done, and they basically transformed the industry in this company. So there's no question about the intellectual capability. First of all, entrepreneur skills. Some people are born, some people can learn, but they need to have the support. And that is financial support right from the early stage, either mom and dad or friends or angel investors or something else. And you need it every step of the way. So it doesn't start, you know, with just one financing round. You have to continue raising money as you go. And that's the problem. At the early stages, they really have no support. So if they're sitting in a city somewhere, not in Kiev or even in a big city, but they may have great ideas and a lot of skills, but they have no way to realize that. So,
Alex, again to you in terms of bottleneck, first question, and also the similar question about European Union regulations. Are those regulation barriers for development of Ukrainian agribusiness?
What do you mean with European Union? You mean your free trade agreement? Or?
Yeah, restrictions on the certification and anything related to ability of Ukrainian companies to use European Union market.
I think the biggest problem of Ukrainian agriculture is lack of agriculture policy in the country. We have a lot of institutions which have actually something with policy, but we do not have a policy. The problem is that in Europe, for example, they have a clear statement on agriculture policy: increase productivity and save the rural areas. That means they push the subsidies into the rural areas, into the small farms, etc. In the United States, they say the goal of the agriculture policy is to increase the income of the farmers. In Russia, they have a policy like we need actually to save the food safety. In Ukraine, we do want to achieve everything and nothing specially. And that's a big issue, because if we declare our goal is to implement the European rules, that means we need to do that like over the next 20 years. Because European rules and European certification, inspection, etc., that's a huge complex of institutions which has been created in Europe for the last 40 years. And if Ukrainian politicians believe it's possible to do over the next 2 years, then something wrong. And the problem is also that Ukrainian products are quite successful worldwide. So Ukraine is a top export country in terms of agriculture goods worldwide. So we are number 3 in terms of export of grain. We are number 1 worldwide exporter of plant oil. We are number 3 exporter of rapeseed. We are number 5 exporter of grains totally, corn, etc. Soybean increase. I mean, why should we need right now, or why should we look right now, especially on European rules? There are a lot of opportunities somewhere as well. So China, for example, Indonesia, South Africa, etc. So I do not think that Europe should be the goal for the Ukrainian agriculture. It's a nice part, wealthy part, but there around the world a lot of people which are hungry, and Ukraine can't feed them.
Thank you. So I think we are kind of approaching our time limit, and before we end, I want to ask all panelists to think about like forward-looking statement and forecast the coming year in terms of sectorial development in their particular businesses. So please again do it as brief as possible, and I I will stop you in 1 minute and we will start this part. Forward-looking, what you see, like development in Ukraine, in the region, sectors.
Well, I think when the problem starts, it starts roughly, but it recovers slowly, and it consists of many small steps. And then recently, I think I have a hope that we've seen some small steps happening with positive things, because it's been peaceful in the east, relatively. We have a macro stability, relatively, compared to what we had before. So with all this small, and also this positive momentum being built in the government, of course, reforms could be done quicker and faster and in a bolder way, but they are happening. We've seen also that reflected in the Doing Business ranking to some degree. That also reflects that. So I think with all these steps and being consistently moving in that direction, we could be moving towards the growth. Of course, the global market, the regional markets should be also supported, because Ukraine is the export-oriented economy. But hopefully we'll get there.
Thank you. Dylan?
Well, I'll maybe talk about the emerging markets in general rather than Ukraine or Turkey. So we enjoyed a great 10 years of emerging markets, of developing markets, and it looks like the next 2 or 3 years will be tough because of the increases in interest rates in the US. But after that, I think again the emerging markets could pick up because they have all the demographics and want to grow and everything else. But the next 2 or 3 years look tough, so we should be getting ready for that.
Several years ago, I wrote an article. It was, I fed my dog potential and the dog died. So our challenge is to turn the potential into value, economic, social, and otherwise. And this is what, not my term, but I liked it. Yesterday, the CTO told me, you have intellectual capital, but we need to turn that into intellectual capitalists. So I think that's help for entrepreneurs as much as we possibly can, and I think they can take off. And, that's great.
So any specific recommendation you can make, like for governments, how should it be implemented? I don't know, like government funds, what specific
just learn from those that have been successful doing it. You don't have to reinvent the wheel and say, well, we're Ukrainian, we have to put our own rockets in space. We can learn from them very quickly, and we can learn from their mistakes, by the way. Poland is a good example, Israel is a good example, Ireland's a good example. And it's not that hard to do. And then say, okay, let's do this, this, and this in this puzzle, and start to help entrepreneurs. Just one very quick, you're going to cut me off, but Horizon 2020 is a $81 billion EU program, right? Horizon 2020. It's for R&D, to strengthen EU R&D. Well, Ukraine qualifies for that, right? So there was a SME call recently. There was 960 proposals submitted. The largest one was from Spain, 250. 150 from Italy. Guess down the list, Israel submitted 52. Now, Israel is not part of the EU as far as I know, but they qualify. Ukraine qualifies, and Ukraine submitted, how many do you think? 2 proposals, and they were from us. There should have been 100 proposals. It's like up to $2.5 million, $3 million worth of financing that Ukrainians can qualify for. And we should be doing, it should be 100 proposals.
Okay, thank you. Alex, in terms of your IMC, so what is your forward-looking statement for the coming years? What you see for your business? Will it grow or not grow?
Yeah, actually I wanted to start with a small sentence which was said by the former mayor of Berlin. So 20 years ago, the mayor of Berlin, Klaus Wowereit, said like, Berlin is very poor but sexy. We need investments. So the same is also with Ukrainian agriculture. Ukrainian agriculture is kind of efficient but sexy, and agriculture needs investments. So we need to do everything here in the country and also in the company just to attract investors to invest in Ukrainian agriculture. That's the same story for the sector, but also for IMC. As a public company, it's a pity just to look on the stock exchange, because the war with Russia, the whole political situation affects the shares value of the company. So, I mean, we do everything just to increase the market cap of the company, but at the same time, the whole situation here in the country should be improved definitely. That both together will actually improve the situation and market cap of the company.
Thank you. Question, please focus on the most sectorial industry, like comparison in Ukraine and if you're looking at.
Well, I'm talking after Alex. I mean, if I recall correct, Alex may correct me, Kernel had its highest EBITDA ever in its history this year, right? Despite all the issues which Ukraine is facing, loss of Crimea, significant loss of Donbass and so on, right? It's a very good sign in my opinion. Again, I've mentioned this, M&As in pharma or IT. I mean, it's actually a record M&A. We never had such big M&As in this sector. It's actually in pharma for the first time in the history of Ukraine, we have a strategic coming to Ukraine, Western strategic, and buying the whole company. It's like never happened before, even in our best times. And again, it's quite attractive valuation. So in my opinion, despite all the short-term issues which we are facing, and of course there is a lot of room in terms of for improvement, in terms of reforms, but if you look at the government which we had last 2 years, it's a very good progress. So let's support which reforms are currently taking place, and actually quite a few of us here at the panel at the forum are involved. So let's continue moving into this direction and we will have even better results. That's it.
Okay, thank you everybody, and we have to vote again our question and we will see how our results changes, and I will turn over to
I can ask the question from here. So.
Thank you to audience. Not all questions that I received I was able to ask, but I did my best to fit them to the time and the format.
So let's do our closing voting for this panel. Question number 1. What would be the most popular source of financing for corporates in CEE in 2016, 2017? And here are the proposed answers. A, own capital, B, bank debt, C, public debt, D, public equities, E, private equities. I will remind you that the results of the initial voting we had showed that the majority of the audience believes that corporates could rely on 2 major sources of financing, own capital and bank debt. So let's see what results we receive now. So we had like 4 questions. Okay, so we are ready. So yeah, the picture changes. Now the majority of the audience believes that corporations in CEE can rely mainly on own capital in the upcoming 2 years. Now let's go with question number 2, Ukraine specific, IT sector, and the question was, do you believe that IT companies are driving the economic growth in Ukraine? And the proposed answers are yes, they already are. B, they will become in a few years, and C, no, they will not become such drivers. Again, I will remind you what the maybe the initial answers were. So 42% of you believed that that IT companies, IT startups will become drivers in a few years or in the future, and 38% of you were more pessimistic and, well, did not see future prospects in the IT sector. 38% choosing answer C. Well, I think that we have another quite significant change. We have now 48% seeing good prospects for IT companies playing a role in the Ukrainian economy, while still 35% believe that no, they will not become drivers of the Ukrainian economy. So thank you, gentlemen, for the panel, for the interesting discussion.